Good morning, Restoration Park. I am here in Springfield, Ohio at Champion City Vineyard Church, along with two of the pastors, Jason Channels and Bruce Willmann. And we're going to talk to you today a little bit about racism and the way that it brings division into the body of Christ. So go ahead, tell us a little bit about who you are, what your role is here.
Hello, I'm Jason Channels. I serve as campus pastor here at Champion City Vineyard Church. I'm a native to Springfield, was raised here, matriculated through the schools. I have a wife and two sons, and yes.
That's enough.
That's enough.
My name is Bruce Willmann. I'm the senior leader here at Champion City. My wife and I founded the church in 1999 and moved to Springfield to start the church.
Can we start with just trying to get a definition of what racism is? I'd like to hear it, especially coming from a couple pastors who are involved in trying to just dissolve the racism issues that have divided the body of Christ. So tell us what you think racism is and how it impacts Christians.
You want to go first?
Sure. I would define racism as a prejudice or prejudgment of an individual based upon the color of their skin, the cultural background, whether it be the way a Caucasian individual thinks about an African American or African individual, or vice versa, a prejudgment of someone who's Indian or Asian, Hispanic, but just looking ill at someone based upon the difference in their skin color, their nationality, cultural background, the limiting of resources, or segregating individuals based upon the color of the skin, or holding goods based upon someone's skin color or nationality.
Okay.
And I would add to that, I think there's also a view of my race is superior to other races. I agree with everything that he said, but I would just add that as well. Like there's some feeling of superiority,
Sure.
Based upon our color.
Jason, I don't know any African Americans that have not experienced racism and it's brought them pain. Can you talk a little bit about any experiences like that you've had?
Sure. Well, growing up within the city schools here in Springfield, I can remember in elementary school, hearing the word nigger for the first time coming out of a white kid's mouth, and not really knowing at that time, being kind of in that stage of innocence, not really knowing what that word means, and and going home and knowing that it was derogatory, I felt some way about it. I knew that it wasn't right, but then upon asking, telling my parents about it, and them enlightening me in regards to where it came from, and then trying to encourage me and let me know that it does not apply to you, because it really means someone of ignorance, and you're not ignorant. And so that was probably the first taste of racism. But then here, even more recently, on my way to Flint, Michigan, over Memorial Day weekend, and being stopped by a police cruiser when I'm looking at my odometer and seeing clearly that I'm going 70 miles per hour, well within the speed limit, and him trying to convince me that I was going 81 miles per hour, and I was telling him, shaking on the inside, and trying to be as polite as I can, no sir, officer, I think you had the wrong person. I would not be going that fast, with my entire family in the car. My two sons are in the back seat. My wife is sitting right here next to me. There's no way I was going 81 miles per hour. He eventually, left and went back to his cruiser and came back and told me, he's just going to give me a warning, but I know it was you. I know it, I know it was you that was, and I'm just like, wow, I can't believe this happened. And, my wife's just shaking her head and just in disbelief, and again, trying to explain to our sons that, this is our reality. sad to say.
How often does something like that happen to you, Jason?
Not very often. Not very often. And yes.
What have you said to your sons about preparation for those kinds of incidents?
Just trying to keep in mind, the golden rule, to treat others as, you want to be treated, to, approach all people and speak to all people with a manner of respect. I have to constantly challenge them to elevate their mindset and their way of thinking, and push them, in regards to, even in the classroom. Sad to say that I have to, kind of coach them and tell them, look, you may not be able to, join in with all of the banter, and joking that takes place among the other kids, because you might just be, picked out, singled out because of the color of your skin, because you're a minority within your classroom, and coaching them, that you've got to, strive to get straight A's, where everyone else might be getting, B's and C's, in order to kind of have that edge, or in life, you always have to see to go higher.
Man, I'm gonna need some of them Kleenex. That breaks my heart. That breaks my heart. I'm sorry. Bruce, what has driven you to have passion to address this issue, not just in the church, but just society?
I think I really started talking about it 10 or 12 years ago. So this has been a long time of just wrestling with this issue of race, and recognizing that the church doesn't look like it should. And more than 50 years ago, Dr. King said that 11 o'clock is the most divided hour in this country. And I would contend it's probably worse today than it was 50 years ago. And so I started challenging my congregation probably 10 years ago, just to simply say, when you get to heaven, you're probably going to be a minority. And we should practice. Like the thriving churches are in Asia and Africa and South America, and they're not in North America and Europe. And so worship should look different for us. We should be practicing for what worship looks like in heaven and the crowd that's going to be surrounding us. And so that's just been something that's been driving me for probably 10 years.
That's a great line. We should practice because we're good. I love that. I'll ask you again, Bruce. What happens within you when you hear racist comments or read racist comments?
There's this anger that just boils up inside of me. Like even when he's sharing, of the way he has to tell his sons to act, and I'm like, your sons are amazing. They should be able to be themselves and who they are and express themselves as these amazing young men of God. And that there's just this anger that, I'm really angry about systematic racism. And 10 years ago, I started reading what my friend Doug Rowe would say, you were reading the wrong books and it changed your heart. And so I started reading some different authors who came out with some things that just really challenged me on the issue of race. And I've had to do a lot of repenting for things that I've thought or said over the years. And but it's been an interesting journey of just but yeah, anger is probably the foremost thought that I have.
Righteous anger.
I hope that most of it's righteous. And
sometimes it's just not.
And that it comes out, it's probably righteous anger, but I may not deal with it in the most righteous way.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, how about you, Jason? The same question. When you hear racist comments or see racist comments, what does that do to you?
It's hurtful. I mean, it just really creates a pain there that is just just a constant reminder of the fact that yes, we may have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go, and it's just painful. It's hard not to take it personally, even though it might not have been said to my face, or said directly to me over, social media. When I hear it, it feels like a personal attack, like they're talking about me, it's just very painful, very it just hurts a lot.
Probably doesn't get any easier or better. Does it get worse?
No, yeah, I would say it does get worse because again, when I look at all that my ancestors had to endure, and forerunners in regards to fighters for civil rights, and trying to bring about equality and justice for all, and seeing all that they sacrificed and went through to get to a certain point, and you're thinking we're beyond some things now. We've moved on from that, but then you're slapped in the face with it again, like, wow, are we really still talking about this? Are we really still dealing with this? It's very hurtful, yeah, and it does feel worse. It feels worse.
How are you personally battling racism, and what do you see as the results?
You want to go?
Yeah. Well, I would say that my sitting here today is part of my battling of racism. Just the willingness to tear down my own personal walls. The walls of the church that I had founded, and merged with Champion City Vineyard Church, and link arms with my brother Bruce here, is my personal battling of racism, immersing my sons into a school that with regards to education that again, it's not very diverse. I would say it's predominantly a white school, but refusing to pull them out because of that, and put them in an environment that might be a little more comfortable for them, where there's more people of their skin color, but leaving them there to be able to deal with whatever challenges might come their way, or awkwardness in regards to conversations, feelings, is my way of battling racism, to not back away from other races, or go run into my own little comfort zone, or what makes my arena, where everything is black or of one color, but to go at it, and try to embrace, unite, is my way of.
Do you see victories or rewards from any of those things, or are you just still like, man, I'm still swimming upstream hard?
No, I do see victories. I've seen opportunities for very candid and authentic conversations come about because of my willingness to merge with Bruce and Champion City Vineyard, and other people coming right out and telling me, look, we're not diverse enough. We need more diversity. Can you come, and partner with us? And you can, join, this board because of that. Seeing people come, stand up to our defense. That I don't know would have happened had I not, been open, to just coming through relationship with them, and association with them, but through my willingness to, kind of let down my guard, and be open and be approachable, it's caused others, to stand up and come to my defense and say some things that I'm like, wow, did he just say that? I'm looking like, wow, I can't believe that came out of his mouth. But it's like, wow, so I do see some positive things coming about, and some victories taking place. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Lord.
Yes.
How about you, Bruce? Same question.
So we started trying to live a more diverse life probably about 2001. We started with the education of our daughter. She was 7 at the time, and we intentionally put her in a charter school where she was one of 3 white kids in a class. And we wanted her to experience what it's like to be a minority. We wanted her to grow up in diversity. And it was fascinating. It was the best thing that ever happened to her. Like, we would have kids who would come to our class, or come from her class, who would come to our home, and they would be like, "You live in a mansion." And we're like, no, not really. We took kids from her class on vacation with us, and they had never been out of Springfield, and it was such a learning environment for her. And who knew that 16 years later, 13 years later, we would become friends, and we did a New Year's Eve service together. And my daughter was home from college, and she goes, "That's Mrs. Channels." She was the class 8 in my class.
Oh, wow.
So we, in 2001 is the first time we ever had a connection, and we didn't even know it.
Right.
And, in 14 years later, in 2015, we merged churches.
Yeah, that's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. Man, you're living what you say you believe. Good man.
I'm trying to. Yeah.
How did you guys come to form this multiracial, multicultural congregation?
So we met officially in 2014. Jeff Pinkleton of The Gathering started a pastors group, and we wound up being in that group together.
Okay.
And we just developed this friendship. And in July of 2015, I heard a sermon preached on tearing down the walls that divide us. And it was on Ephesians 2, and this incredible message that was like, oh, this is so obvious. How do you build a church without walls? And I just sent him a link to it and said, hey, listen to this and tell me what you think. And we got together about 6 weeks later to finally, his dad was in the hospital and going through some stuff, and my wife and I went on a 2-week trip for our 25th anniversary. And finally we get together, and at that meeting we got together to discuss this message and how can we take some steps to tear down the walls that divide the church racially. And before the meeting was over, I'm like, this is a stupid idea, but what would you think about merging our churches together? And I didn't have the authority to do that. I didn't have, but I just felt like that's what God was doing in that minute. And I came back and I told my elders, so I asked someone if they would be willing to merge churches with us. I hope that's okay. And 4 days later, we met, our wives, the 4 of us met, and we had a meeting that lasted like 5 hours, and an hour and a half of it was prayer. As they were trying to leave, we're like, let's just pray before we go. And we stood in my living room and prayed for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And God just knit our hearts together in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, that's cool.
We're like, oh, yeah, this is what we're supposed to do. And 6 weeks later, we had our first service together.
It's 6 weeks.
6 weeks. There's so many things we didn't do that that we should have done, but we're like, this is what God's doing. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Would you guys consider doing that with us?
Sure. Let's figure out a way.
Yeah,
Let's go 3 wide.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jason, what's your side of that story?
Likewise, we had come to know each other through the gathering and this meeting of pastors. Hit it off, become friends. I had gotten to a practice of visiting other churches on New Year's Eve rather than having a New Year's Eve service. At our church, we would, I would, reach out to a friend that I knew was pastoring a church and say, hey, can we come and join you in your service? And so that was my first time coming to be part of the service. Was on New Year's Eve of 2014, going into 2015, and just fell in love with the environment here, the atmosphere, the love that was felt here. It was like, wow, I could get used to this. Even the worship style, it was just, it was something different, which is something I was longing for within our church. I had, when I began Uniting Faith Church, I'd always said from the beginning that I did not want to pastor an all-black church. I didn't feel that God, called me to pastor an all-black church. And so I was, constantly looking at ways that I could become multicultural and diverse, from the switching up of our worship styles, not singing, a certain style of music, every Sunday or, every song, but switching up worship styles, diversifying the leadership. I had in my mind that God was going to send me, some young hip white guy off the street that I could, disciple, and I can make him my youth pastor, to diversify the leadership. That was the vision I had. But not knowing that, God was working in the background and about, in the backdrop, while I'm thinking of these things. He had some other plans in mind, and had a young lady who was a minister at my church actually give me a word of knowledge, a word of prophecy after I had spoken one Sunday. She came up to me and said, "Pastor, can I pray for you?" And I said, "Sure." So as she's praying, she said, "I just see God sending pastors to you to ask about merging churches." And I'm like, "Oh, wow, okay." And so that was just something that was kind of in the back of my mind, just kind of filed it away with
Sure.
all of the other words that I received down through the years, and then I get this message from Bruce saying, "Hey, can you watch this video of this sermon that was preached at the Vineyard International Convention in Columbus?" My friend Dr. Charles Montgomery preached a message called "How to Build a House Without Walls," and I said, "Sure, no problem." He said, "Maybe we can get together later and talk about the state of the church in general, the state of the church in Springfield." And I was like, "Sure." Start watching the video, and from the get-go, I'm just in tears, crying like a baby as I'm watching this African American man share his testimony of how he left a predominantly African American church and church organization to partner with the Vineyard, because he saw the need for change. He saw, where, the church that he's a part of did not represent that church in Revelations, that where they were from every, tribe and tongue, and so in his seeking out something different, he partnered with the Vineyard, and he talked about his personal testimony, and he talked about these keys to tearing down the walls that divide us, that racial divide. And one of the keys that he talked about was being willing to pay the price. And that's when he shared his testimony of how, he was ridiculed, for leaving this predominantly black church and black organization to partner with, this Jewish, white man and the Vineyard, and just the ridicule he received from his own people. And as he's testifying, I'm just rocking back and forth in my chair and saying, "Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes." Not even knowing what I'm saying yes to, but just saying, "Yes, Lord, yes, Lord." I can see myself walking in his shoes. And again, not knowing where it was leading, when Bruce, asked could we meet, my wife and I were just kind of like, I wonder what he wants to meet about, not knowing what was going to come out of it, but just, having some type of feeling that, God was doing something, and that this might be the beginning of something beautiful. And we met. And we cried as he shared his testimony, and was just, I appreciated his transparency. He was open with me in regards to his struggles with, the vision for a multicultural church and how it wasn't taking place as he had envisioned. His statement to me was, I don't believe God wants to have a lily white church in downtown Springfield. He's like, we're in downtown Springfield. We should be representative of all of Springfield. He doesn't want us to have a lily white church in downtown Springfield. I'm like, wow, I can't believe this white man is saying this to me. But he's crying, I'm crying, and then the proposal came, and of course I said, well, I need to pray about it, talk to my wife about it, and we just felt good about it. It was like, I always, when it comes to making those critical decisions, those big decisions, I always, tell people to pray for the peace of God. Pray for the peace of God. And as we prayed, I just felt the peace. I felt the peace.
Did your church feel that?
Now that's another story. Now that's another story.
Okay, well that's the next question. Yeah. What were the hardships?
Oh wow. And so Yeah, the church was, they were not so receptive. There were some that went along with it because of their love for me as a person, as a pastor. But there was definitely some apprehensions there. Again, we're talking about just years. People, sadly, I didn't have a whole lot of people that joined my church that came right off of the streets, or out of the world that were not a part of some church at some point in time. And so all of them had this church background, and culture of, coming from predominantly African American churches. And so, for them to, leave that culture, and, immerse themselves into, a predominantly white church, white culture, different worship styles, different pastors. Some of the questions were, just, okay, so who's our pastor?
Right.
Who are we listening to? Whose voice are we following? And so there were some definitely struggles there. Not only the racial differences, but also theological differences. Doctrinal differences. What do they believe? So yeah, they weren't all on board for sure. And like I said, there was a core that made the move. Out of just a love and appreciation for me, and a willingness to say, hey, we'll give it a try. I had Bruce come over after a Sunday service, and he addressed the congregation, was just there to kind of introduce himself, answer any questions they may have, trying to make the transition go a little bit easier. And he
went over there and got real charming.
He put himself out there, laid himself on the grill, so willingly. But yeah, we kind of did the best we could to ease people's pains.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How did this church respond? Or were you Vineyard City then?
Yeah, we were Champion City then.
Champion City, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
how did this church respond to the idea?
They were enthusiastic.
Okay.
Like I said, I had to come back, to the elders and say,
Yeah.
I kind of did this. Is this so? And they voted unanimously. Like,
Oh,
yes,
cool.
we need to do this. This is our heart as a church. And we've gone through some transition in the last almost 3 years, but it's been it's been the heart of our church to go after reconciliation. And
Did you do things to welcome the new folks in? What were they?
We definitely did some things to, intentionally trying to welcome people. And that was the beginning of a shift in our church culture. Like we have to do things that will be uncomfortable for us,
Yeah.
but we're going to have to change some things so that everyone in the room has things that they're comfortable with.
Sure.
And so that's been the hardest part of all of this, is trying to create a culture that's different than what we had before.
So you sent a message in that about how much you valued
Yeah.
these people, brothers and sisters, coming to join you.
Yeah.
That's cool. Did you guys feel that?
Yes, definitely. Again, there were some, like some people, they wanted like a drastic change, and just we're just gonna flip it, all at once, and not be willing to ease into a gradual change. And so some people wanted, more change quicker than what was given. But we could definitely see. They were intentional about trying to diversify the worship styles. Having myself lead worship. And kind of pull together a worship team with different styles of song. And so they're very intentional that way.
One of the things that we did also was we intentionally, at the time we had 2 campuses, and we intentionally made him the campus pastor of our downtown campus. And I wanted to rush that. And he's like, no, you need to slow down and let people get to know me before you're, giving me this title as the person who's in charge of this campus.
Is this the campus?
Yeah, this is the only campus we have right now. We closed our other campus,
Gotcha.
and he's still the campus pastor. So he is really the face of this campus. He's the leader of this campus. And my role has transitioned into I'm leading the leaders and I'm raising up new leaders, and I lead the teaching team. This is where we're going.
Okay.
But I probably only speak 10 or 12 times a year. He speaks that much as well as part of our team.
Okay.
Right.
Man, I really admire what you guys have done. You've both made sacrifices to see this happen, and one of the sacrifices has been your ego. That's impressive. Very impressive. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jason and Bruce, I think anybody who is a believer would understand that racism is sin. Racism is against the scripture in a number of places. God makes all of us in his image. We are the same. We're not to think better of ourselves than others, no matter what the cause is. And yet still, even those of us who know that, believe that, and understand it, have within us some of those fears, some of those anxieties, some of those racist ideas and thoughts. A classic example is, someone who hits her lock on her car door when she sees an African American walking toward her car. That woman's never going to think that she's a racist, but yet she had that kind of response. So where do those come from, and how do we get past that? Any ideas?
Well, I think a lot of fear is derived from ignorance, and there's a fear of the unknown. What you don't know, what you don't understand, what you haven't been exposed to, you become afraid of, or you are prone to listen to what other people say about it and take it at face value, and that is the truth. Not really trying to find out the truth for yourself. And so I think a lot of it's just a lack of exposure, and just the culture and environment that you were raised in. Funny story. On my job, we were having a staff meeting, and this is when I was still an inspector. I'm now a program administrator. While I was an inspector, they would call us, all the inspectors in from around the state, to have staff meetings, and sometimes those would be overnight. It would be a 2-day staff meeting. So one night we went out to dinner, and one of my coworkers, inspector from down in southeast Ohio, had invited his family up to join us for dinner, and so we're sitting there at dinner, and I keep seeing this little white boy just like staring at me, like he was just like stare. His eyes were just locked on me, and it became a little bit uncomfortable, to a certain extent. I'm like, why is this kid staring at me? All of a sudden, this little kid gets up out of his seat, walks around the table, and starts rubbing my head as though he's thinking that something might come off on his hand, and I'm like, oh my God. Then it hit me like, this guy's never seen a black man, wow. and so but it's sad to say, but this is some people's reality in the society we live in. So he's closed off, unexposed to culture, cultural differences, and so whatever he's told about a black man becomes his reality, becomes the truth. My wife just recently went on a home visit, and she works with kids with developmental disabilities from birth to the age of 3. And this little white girl just, every time Teresa just looked her direction, just, screaming and just, just unapproachable. And so Teresa was there with her coworker who was white and said, well, why don't you work with her and see what happens? She went and worked with no problem at all. There was like just, and so I think just that lack of exposure is what creates this fear, this tension, this prejudice, this racism, and the way to combat it is proximity. One of the keys that Dr. Charles Montgomery talked about in his message, How to Build a House Without Walls, was proximity. We got to come into close proximity. Yeah. We got to rub up against each other. Link arms. Go beyond the church walls. Have dinner together. Our feet have to be underneath the same table at dinner time, just sharing life together.
You know what makes so much sense about that, Jason, is, the stereotypical woman I just described who hangs out with you is not going to experience that. But the only exposure she has is what she sees on the news about this guy, was a protester and burned a car, And so until she or he understands what a brother in Christ is, regardless of the skin,
Yes.
that's going to be down inside there. It's like secret, it's hidden, but it's real. And it's there. That makes a lot of sense. Good answer.
Yes,
Thank you. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely part of it, is just not being exposed to people from different races. I know for me, my family was, they probably would never say they were racist, but my grandfather, I mean, he used the N-word all the time, and he. There was this woman, he was the maintenance person in this building, and all wealthy people who lived in this building, and he would give this woman a ride. She was the cleaning lady, and he would pick her up for work and take her back home, and he would call her the N-word. I gotta go take that, to home, and I'm like, as growing up, hearing that it was a constant in my family. But my experience, I had friends growing up who were African American, and so my experience in outside of my family was different than my experience inside my family. And my grandparents on both sides I would say were racist, even though on one side it was more subtle. But they both had racist tendencies, and yet I had and I remember the first time that I heard a racist thought, or just blurted out by my grandmother on my mother's side. I was like shocked that came out. I had never seen that before, and I was probably 12 or 13. And I'm like, whoa, did she really just say that? And it just would shock me. So I would say that it's lack of being around, but also it's from the people we grow up with, and what they indoctrinate us with, and just trying to change that.
Jason and Bruce, I'm wondering if racism is as much a global problem as it is locally in the churches. Do you guys have an opinion on that, or some understanding about it?
I would say that it is a global problem. We see it happening all around Europe. We see it even in Africa. We see instances of it. I've got friends in Zimbabwe who, they see that as a reality. I think anytime you have one race that's a minority, a majority, then they will hold that over people, of different races.
Okay.
So I think it's a global problem, and I think that we're just like everybody else in that sense.
Agree with that, Jason?
Right, I would agree. My wife and I were watching a video not too long ago. As a matter of fact, as part of her assignment, she's in school to get her master's in school counseling through Wright State University, and she had to watch a video for this class she is taking on multicultural mentalities, and the video was a group of guys from different ethnicities and races, and they were talking about their experiences within those races, and a couple of them was Indian, one was Hispanic, and they were talking about how even within their own race back home there's this kind of like this classism based upon the color of their skin.
Really?
The darker skin tone people were kind of looked at as bad or not as fairly as the lighter complexions of skin tone, even amongst their own race. And so, I would say just, people just find it, they find a way to take each other's differences and use those to separate one another from each other and put one above the other.
And I think part of our sinful nature is that we want to identify ways in which we're better than other people.
Yes.
That makes sense.
And whether that's through race or through other things.
I would say that the church, what happens here on Sunday morning, is kind of the your stake in the ground about this is what we believe and this is what we're going to do, and it's so commendable. I can't tell you how proud I am that you're doing that, and proud to know you. I really admire what you're doing. But I wonder, are there things that you encourage the people of this church to do outside Sunday morning, or that you would encourage other people to do, other believers outside Sunday morning, that will also help with this reconciliation?
Yeah, I think Jason kind of touched on part of that when he talked about proximity. Like, we need to spend time with people that are different than us, and so we encourage the people of our congregation to do that. We're trying to do things that are more community focused. For instance, this coming Saturday night, we are celebrating Juneteenth in our congregation with a freedom concert. And so that's inviting people from our community to come and to celebrate, racial reconciliation and slavery ending in this country, and how can we celebrate freedom and bring people together. So we're trying to do things outside of the congregation.
Yeah, we've had a group of families, Caucasian families, being intentional about, trying to come into proximity that have actually moved, from the north side of town to the south side of town, into, neighborhoods, where they're surrounded by, predominantly African American, families, to, try to be intentional, about, coming into proximity and not, just just being satisfied with, I go to so-called multicultural church on Sunday mornings. I worship with people of other color, but actually doing life with people of other colors and ethnicities and races.
Do you have any victory stories about that?
I would say, the Vision Party is one. We held the Vision Party at the house of the young lady, one of our elders who led our 10-week study on racial reconciliation, so it was at her house, which is over on Southern Avenue, she actually had a couple from her neighborhood, that hadn't even attended the racial reconciliation class or study that we were doing, but they were invited and they came to the Vision Party to be a part of what we were doing. And this was actually a Caucasian lady, and her husband was Hispanic, and they are the two kids theirs, or did they adopt those?
No, they're kids.
All right, yeah. So just beautiful family, interracial family, coming from the community, there to be part of our Vision Party, and just the I've heard stories of members of our congregation, just walking the neighborhood that they live in, and lending equipment to the people within their community, and just really just breaking down those walls, those barriers, and
That's cool.
Yeah.
I know you guys have seen progress, and I assume you have hope to see even more progress. Can you tell us what maybe has you most discouraged and what has you most encouraged about this move?
You want to go first?
Oh man, so discouragement for me will probably be the lack of patience among those from my community, to watch this grow, again, we live in a society, so sad to say, that is, built on instant gratification. This microwave generation. They want it to happen now, and to not have the patience to kind of walk through some of the phases of change that we need to go through. Have those awkward conversations. Even the awkward silence. That might be present. And so, I've seen, the majority of my congregation from when we merged is no longer part of the ministry. And so now we're looking at, either, to become more diverse, their return, or from a different group of, African Americans or Hispanics or Asians to come and be a part of the ministry. And so to see them leave, because, again, we didn't have that instant change, is discouraging. We ministered a message together at the beginning of not this year, but I think it was last year, and in that we referenced a message that we heard at the diversity conference for the Vineyard, where a gentleman talked about the scripture in Isaiah where it talks about the wolf and the lamb lying together, and he talked about how in order for that to happen, he talked about the wolf, being the white people, or the dominant species in that relationship, and the lamb being the minority or the weaker species in that relationship. And so it was funny when Bruce was talking about the wolf. He's like, "Listen up, white people," And but in that sermon, he talked about the wolf has to take lamb off the menu in order for that relationship to work. Lamb has to be off the menu. Then he talked about the lamb having to be willing to forgive the wolf for past offenses, and not hold the past against them. To forget about the fact that you gobbled up my ancestors. But this is a new day, and so I see that. I really do see that amongst our community. At least it feels amongst African Americans, the unwillingness to forgive. And I know it's hard to forget, sure. but to forgive, and not hold the past against every white person. Every white person is not the same. There are some good white people out there, who are loving, and
proximity.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And we wanted to come into proximity with them. And to see that, a lot of African Americans, they'll talk about the need to change, and wanting change, but they're doing it from their own little corner, their own little space, and not wanting to really come in, and try to come together. The 10-week class that we had was predominantly white people. I had to encourage, because I couldn't make it to the first couple of classes due to my son's basketball schedules, and I was encouraging the one elder who was leading it, letting her know it's more's going to come, because the first couple of classes was just her and her family, and then a room full of white people, and it's and so it seems as though the white people are more open to this than African Americans, and that's discouraging. That's discouraging, let's say, to see what seems to be a lot of talk at times, and I know it's hard. There's some difficulties, and not saying that that there was no wrong done, and not saying that it's easy, right. But sometimes we have to come out of our comfort zone and do the uneasy things. Yeah. And probably the most encouraging thing, just a couple weeks ago, Memorial Day weekend, Bruce and I married our first interracial couple together as a result of our churches merging.
Oh, wow.
The young lady came from the church that I had founded, and the young man was attending Champion City Vineyard Church prior to us merging. And the first love story taking place as a result of our merging. And so doing that wedding together, standing side by side, him addressing Breon and me addressing Daniel, and giving their vows together was just monumental. And for me, it really it was like a kind of like a catapult. Felt like we were just a catalyst. Something's getting ready take place here.
If you guys keep doing that, racism will totally disappear. Right?
That's
It has
right.
to.
Yeah.
There's no distinction.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about you, Bruce?
I would say the discouragement would be that I thought we'd be further along by now. Before we merged, our church was probably 10 to 12% minorities, whether it was Asian or Hispanic or African American. And now I would say we're somewhere around 15, 18%. And it's, and that's with a huge percentage of the people that came with Jason leaving. Some of them, they got married and they moved to other places,
Right.
or, there's lots of reasons behind it, but it's been a lot harder than we ever thought, but I think it's been more rewarding than we ever thought too. Like, to me, that's been the joy, is no matter what we're seeing as far as what we would call results, I think the thing that brings me joy is, like, we've built this relationship over the last 4 years that I can't think of many people that I love more than this guy.
Yeah.
I think that's been the most encouraging part to me, is like we have built this amazing relationship, and I think that's been the joy of all of it.
Yeah.
When it gets really hard, I can still be like, oh yeah, but this has been the result, and that's been the good thing.
Are there things that you would do differently looking back for the merger?
Ooh, wow. I don't know. I think there's two parts to that. I mean, we did it so quickly. Like I said, 6 weeks from the day I asked him, we were starting to have church together. And maybe if we had taken more time, we could have helped with some of those things. I don't know, though. And then even changing, the culture, if we had done it all at one time and said, hey, this is it, this is what worship's going to look like every week from now on, I don't know that would have changed anything.
Yeah.
I think that's a really hard question.
Right.
Yeah, you might have ideas, but who knows whether they would be any better. Last question for you. I have an African-American nephew who has spent the majority of his life in Caucasian churches. And just recently had an experience where one of the elders in those churches responded to him in a way that would be considered racist. And his question is, what do you do with that? And so I'm sure that in most churches that can happen. That can happen. I would hope not, but it can happen.
Right.
So how would you suggest people respond to another brother or sister in Christ who lets some of that stuff surface, and it's exposed? What do you do with that when you see that in someone? Same thing as any other kind of sin, or is this you have to soft pedal this? I guess I'd just like to hear what you would do in a situation like that.
You want to go first? You want me to?
You can go first.
I would say that because of the very thing that Jason talked about ignorance, I would contend a lot of people do and say racist things, and they may not even be aware that they've done something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would approach them in a humble way and say, I'm not sure if you're aware, but when you said that, this is how it landed on me as a person. And it felt this way. And try to approach it in that manner, where you're not coming right out and saying, that was a racist. I don't think we need to be that confrontational.
Right.
But at the same time, I think people need to stand up and say, I'm not sure if you're aware.
Yeah.
But these are, when you said that, this is the way it came off.
You can educate folks.
And so I think it is. I think part of it is educating.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what we've been trying to do the last 3 years, and what we did. Spent 10 weeks on racial reconciliation is just trying to do education. So,
Yeah.
Now, Jason, you know, I asked a similar question earlier, and you said, yeah, that's painful. You take it personal. So would you agree with Bruce with that, or would you do something different?
No, I would agree. I mean, even though it's painful, it hurts. I would agree that in the approach to addressing that, you have to be mindful, you know, of the fact that, you know, it might have been an honest mistake, you know, something that he's just unaware of, you know, did not know. And so, you know, approach it, you know, humbly, you know, speak the truth, but, you know, do so in love, and just let them know, look, this is how that made me feel, you know, that really hurt, you know, it landed on me, you know, this way, and to give them the opportunity to you know, think about it, you know, and respond. Hopefully they'll respond with the answer, look, I did not mean for it to come across that way. It's not what I meant. You know, I'm sorry. You know, how, you know, what can I do to make this better? And then, you know, hopefully see an adjustment or a change in what he's saying and how he says it. But you know, as Bruce said, that, you know, we have to give each other the opportunity to learn from one another. You know. And get to know one another, you know, to see, you know what triggers, you know, a certain reaction, you know, to know that, you know, not everything that's, you know, maybe funny to him, it might not be funny to me. You know, not every, you know, joke lands the same way. So, yeah.
And I think it's important. Like, I want to commend Jason and his wife Teresa. Like, they let my wife and I ask them questions.
Yes.
Like, we've built this relationship. Like, we'll just ask questions, and they're very patient with us, and they're like, yeah, this is why you know, and they explain things to us. But I think that's part of it is, as we've come into proximity, we have honest and real discussions about race.
Yeah.
And it has been so enlightening for us. Like, we, I'm sure, have done things unintentionally over the last 3.5, 4 years as friends that have offended them. And we've just been able to have discussion.
Yeah. Right.
That's what brothers do, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, off camera, thank you. You know, I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the vulnerability, openness. This is a cause that's great and just, and you guys are willing to pay the price, you know, to see that justice happen. And I can't tell you how much I admire it. It's just, like I said, very commendable. So I think you guys are, your influence is expanding beyond this church. You know, it's going to be happening in ours. And I mean, people know who you guys are. You know, I mean, I knew who to call right away, and I said, "Oh, this is what we're going to do." You know, it's called Vineyard. You know, so thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
And man, I know you've got struggles, and you'll face some more. But I mean, don't get discouraged in that, because I mean,
well, and that's what I would say right now is, we're not a multicultural church yet.
Yeah.
Because statistics, like people that measure those things, they say it's either 75 or 80%. You can't have more than 75 or 80. I don't remember what the exact number is of the predominant race to be considered multicultural, and we're not there yet. But that's our dream. That's our hope for our church is in Springfield, so Springfield is 73% white. Our hope is that we'll at least reflect our city. Yeah. I mean, we'd like it to be more than that.
More than that, right?
But I mean, we won't consider ourselves multicultural till we at least reflect our city.
Right.